Everything collapsed. His home, his family, his future. He didn't leave to be saved. He left to disappear. A dismantled life left no room for compromise, and the pain that followed her departure consumed everything else. She walked away like their marriage had been a short-term lease, not a lifelong vow. But he didn't just surrender. He erased his tracks, shattered their plans, and left behind letters and documents sharp enough to tear her world apart. Then he vanished. No calls, no backward glance, only one thought in mind. If he had to walk through hell, then she'd have to feel its heat. So what comes next? Greetings, my dear viewer. Please, tell me which city and country you're watching this video from. Maybe you're watching me from a small town or a gigantic metropolis. Write about it. Make sure to subscribe to my channel and share this video with your friends. It will make me very happy. Let's get started. Jim felt utterly defeated. The end of his marriage wasn't just a breakup. It was as if his entire existence had been ripped apart. He couldn't make sense of it. How could she walk away so easily? What had pushed her to this breaking point? All he could do now was figure out how to claw his way out from beneath the ruins of what had once been his life. Leaving Morrison's restaurant behind, he trudged back to the hotel, packed up his belongings with a heavy heart, and deliberately left her things untouched. Let her come looking for them, her dresses, her cosmetics, her husband. Without speaking to anyone else, he quietly checked out and started the drive toward what had once passed for home. But calling it that now felt like some sick joke. It wasn't a home anymore. It was a tomb. And Jim? He was just another restless spirit passing through it. When he pulled into the driveway, he parked the Explorer next to the F-150. The moment he stepped inside, the hollow silence wrapped around him like a shroud. Grief struck with a force he hadn't anticipated, and he dropped onto the living room couch, sobbing uncontrollably. His thoughts raced, always circling back to the kids. That thought tore him apart. Overwhelmed by sorrow, he sat there for more than an hour, soaking in the misery and resentment until something deep inside him fractured. He staggered to the liquor cabinet, yanked out a half-empty bottle of Chivas Regal, smashed the neck off, and guzzled several burning mouthfuls, 6 ounces, maybe more. His hands shaking, he spun around and hurled the shattered bottle into the fireplace. The crash took down the wedding photo that had hung above the mantel. As the frame hit the hearth and splintered, a primal scream escaped his throat. It yanked him back from the edge. "Enough," he growled. "This ends now. I'm not living like this. Not another damn day." He stormed into his office and switched on the computer. The screen flicked to life. 10:24 p.m. A dark idea surfaced. How much damage could he inflict before vanishing for good? Revenge suddenly seemed like the only closure he'd get. She needed to feel the fallout. Everyone did. Logging into their joint bank accounts, he transferred everything into his personal one. Every dollar earmarked for groceries, school clothes, and holidays, gone. The total, $1,700,000. Not a fortune, but a solid sum for a middle-income family. He withdrew $2,500 in cash, left the rest in savings, and shut down every remaining account. Then he began writing. One letter went to his mother, another to her parents. In them, he recounted the events of the night and explained why he was disappearing. Then came the messages to newspapers and local news stations. He named names, gave dates, detailed motives. If she wouldn't tell the truth, he would. Each file was saved and queued for future release. Then came the most agonizing part. Letters to Emma and Tommy, sealed and labeled for their 18th birthdays. He poured himself into those words, trying to help them understand. Maybe one day they would forgive him. Moving to the bedroom he used to share with Linda, he retrieved a rugged gym bag. No suitcase, nothing formal. Into it went socks, underwear, 3 pairs of jeans, 6 t-shirts, flannel shirts, sneakers, and heavy hunting boots. He tossed his toiletry kit inside, then laid his fleece jacket and parka across the bed. He undressed, stepped into a long, scalding shower, then dressed in fresh clothes. After lacing up his worn, steel-toed boots, he stood still for a beat. A breath. A choice. This was it. He picked up his NY Giants cap, the bomber jacket, the duffel bag, and left the room, knowing it was for the last time. In the kitchen, he brewed coffee. While the pot sputtered and filled, he scribbled a note on a yellow legal pad. Linda, goodbye. Live without me, and let it burn. Beneath it, he added a sharp parting jab. Guess who? He laid the note on the table and placed his wedding ring squarely on top. Back in the office, he unlocked the wall safe and pulled out his .357 Colt Python. He clipped on the holster, loaded the revolver, and grabbed 2 boxes of ammunition, along with his passport, the cash he'd withdrawn, and their original marriage certificate. Returning to the kitchen, he tore the certificate into jagged pieces. He pinned them to the wall with a kitchen knife, then opened the fridge, pulled out a bottle of ketchup, and painted around the fragments in red, a twisted, symbolic masterpiece. By the time the coffee was done, he poured himself a mug, fixed it the way he liked, and returned the pot to the warmer. He even refilled the water reservoir, though not out of courtesy. He knew the cheap machine wouldn't shut off on its own. Then, in a petty parting shot, he flung open the fridge and freezer, wedged a chair against them, and yanked the plug. Just for spite, he sliced through the power cord with a second knife. That mess, it would be her burden. He gathered his supplies and stepped into the garage. Raising the overhead door, he walked directly to his gun safe. Linda had always loathed that safe, called it an eyesore, dangerous, an insult to her sense of design. He opened it anyway. Out came his Winchester pump-action shotgun, a Weatherby .30-06, and every box of ammunition he had left. He grabbed his sleeping bag, his compact tent, a ground tarp, and his fishing gear. At the rear of the pickup, he popped the hatch and methodically packed it all in. 2 5-gallon gas cans were strapped into the truck bed. Everything was sealed tight. Then, like a sudden blow to the chest, thoughts of his children surged forward. What would happen to them now? Would they ever understand the choice he was making? He leaned against the truck, groaning aloud under the weight of it. Was this truly the path he was meant to take? Was it really the only way? He was out of explanations. No matter how much effort he poured in, failure clung to him like a second layer of skin. It marked him, an unseen wound etched deep into his soul. A relentless nightmare that stalked him while he was awake, gnawing bit by bit. And now, this was all that remained. This was her parting gift. He slid into the driver's seat, flinging the house keys onto the cold garage floor without a second thought. He didn't bother to lock up or switch off the lights. No backward glance. He simply backed out of the driveway and let the darkness swallow him. His eyes flicked to his watch. A Stour du Volta, something Linda and the kids had wrapped up for him last Father's Day. She'd even shown him the commercial, for the man who gives all and asks for nothing. He'd dismissed it as cheesy sentimentality at the time. But the watch worked well, or so he liked to think. He'd also assumed it was pricey. Naturally. Only later did he learn it had been clearance racked at $79. That felt fitting, like someone had appraised his whole life and slapped on a discount sticker. It was 1:30 a.m. now. He steered toward the offices of L.W. Stearns, a man who'd once treated Jim like a second son, a lifelong friend of the family. L.W. used to say Jim and Linda were unbreakable, the kind of love stories that lasted. Pulling up to the curb, Jim turned off the engine and set his phone alarm for 8 a.m. before leaning back and closing his eyes. He dozed off behind the wheel, lulled by exhaustion. 6 hours later, the gentle buzz of the alarm roused him. He stretched, finished off his now stale coffee, and picked up the phone. He dialed L.W.'s number. It was early, yes, but he didn't have the luxury of waiting. He had to leave, before anyone had the chance, or the will, to stop him. If anyone would even notice. The call went through. "Hello?" came a calm, unwavering voice. L.W. was never rattled, not even at dawn. He was steady, reliable, just the kind of person Jim needed in this unraveling moment. LW, I need a favor. Right now. Can you come to the office? Bring a notary if it's possible. I'll explain everything when I see you. Just, please, it's urgent. What's going on, son? Is Linda all right? LW asked, voice thick with concern. Not something I can explain over the phone, Jim said flatly. If you can't make it, you'll hear the story soon enough from someone else. I'll be there in an hour, LW replied without hesitation. Just promise me you won't do anything rash before I get there. I won't, Jim said, more to himself than to LW. Thanks. 50 minutes later, LW's Cadillac pulled into the parking lot. The older man got out, clicked the lock behind him, and spotted Jim walking toward him, holding a bulky folder. They shook hands silently, no pleasantries exchanged, and made their way inside. The elevator took them to the top floor of the building, where LW's law office overlooked the city skyline. A respected attorney and something of a father figure to Jim ever since his real father died when Jim was just a toddler. LW had filled the role as best he could, driven by loyalty to his late friend. Inside, LW started the coffee maker and gestured for Jim to sit across from his large desk. He checked a few voicemails, then looked up with quiet gravity. All right. Tell me everything. So Jim did. He recounted it all, everything that had transpired over the long, bruising weekend. The events that had led him here, hollow and furious, making desperate phone calls at dawn. His voice remained even. There were no tears. He'd passed grief and landed somewhere deeper, somewhere colder. Anger lived beneath the surface, boiling, but he kept it in check. He looked put together, but inside, he was wrecked. And through the wreckage, one thought wouldn't let go: the kids. LW took it all in, nodding here and there, jotting occasional notes. He never interrupted. When Jim finally finished, LW leaned back, took off his glasses, and rubbed the tension from his face. He let his eyes close for a beat. Too old for this, he thought. When he opened them again, he stared at Jim with quiet sorrow, the kind that comes when you've watched someone grow up and break down in front of you. You got blindsided, son, he said. You didn't stand a chance. Then he added, what are you thinking of doing? Jim didn't blink. I want them to hurt, really hurt. I want to drag it out. But I'm not throwing my life away for revenge. A pause. They're not worth it, not even close. No matter how good it might feel to make them pay, it won't free me. What I do want is to disappear. I'm not talking about lawyers or paperwork. I mean vanish, like she did. No note, no warning, just gone. He laughed, dry, bitter. But for the first time in days, something like relief trickled in. Last night already felt distant, like it belonged to a different man entirely. LW pulled him back. And the kids? Jim's face hardened. The kids? His voice tightened. Am I even their father? Am I supposed to keep sacrificing for them when she forgot they even existed? When she looked through me like I was a stranger? She had always lived like the sun revolved around her. Well, I've got my own orbit now, and in mine she doesn't exist. That's right. Maybe I should feel compassion, but not today, not anymore. Can you help me now? What are my choices? As far as I know, I can just vanish and never come back. That's not illegal, is it? It's exactly what I want, after everything she's done to me. I walked away and left her with over $15,000, didn't even pack my gear. The car? Still hers. I shut off the water, power, and cable. Canceled every insurance policy I had. As for the 401k, I want that saved for the kids when they hit 21. Let them work toward that future themselves. Same with the pension. Whatever's left, put it all in a trust. I'll sign over power of attorney to you. I want to cut every tie. I never want to speak to her again. Not ever. Can we make that happen? The attorney leaned back, exhaling slowly. He studied the man in front of him. Never had he seen someone so hollowed out, and that unsettled him more than anything he'd experienced, even after 2 deployments in Vietnam during the early 70s. He had watched his wife of half a century fade from cervical cancer. But this hit harder than all of that put together, and just like before, he was powerless to stop it. "Yes," he said finally. "It's doable. She might file for divorce, but she'll need to find you first. Or she could try to declare you absent in a newspaper ad. Wait it out. 2 years, and it becomes legally binding. But understand, your kids might never see you again. They'll suffer for this. Your mother will be devastated. Are you sure this is the path you want, Jim? Maybe try mediation, think it over?" But Jim's stare told him all he needed to know. It hurt to see. Mediation? For what? So she can cry and plead for forgiveness? Say it was just a fling, nothing serious? Feed me the usual lines, "It didn't mean a thing, honey." That if I really loved her, I'd move on? Not happening. I'm through. This was her choice, and now she can live with the outcome. Decisions have consequences, LW. Real ones. I paid mine. Alone. Just me. And after sitting with it, I knew I really do want this. What I wish is that none of this ever happened. That it was some twisted prank, a nightmare I'll wake up from. But it's real, and I won't sit in a cramped office with her and a therapist who'll tell me to let it go, that I should forgive, that it was only physical, that she still loves me. Think about the kids, that we can rebuild, that there's hope, blah blah blah. But the most infuriating part? After everything, the lawyers, the court battles, the betrayal, she'll still say, "Can't we just get past this? For the children's sake?" And then threaten to bleed me dry, to humiliate me, to twist everything until it doesn't even make sense anymore. You know what? The lawyer just bowed his head and kept silent. No, this isn't right. She's not right. I'm broken, beyond repair. No one's going to put me back together. And when the tears finally stopped, something inside me cracked. I want my life back. I paused, just briefly. But deep down, I knew, it's already gone, isn't it? Yeah, that chapter's closed. So if my life is over, hers doesn't get to keep going like nothing happened. The lawyer thought it over, long and hard, and came to the only conclusion possible. Jim's mind was made up. He brushed at the tears gathering in his eyes, but they slipped down anyway. Jim took a breath and cleared his throat. The lawyer rose, pulled his shoulders back, and picked up a pencil. That's when Penny Wilson, his assistant and the office notary, walked in and sensed the weight in the room. She hesitated. He motioned for her to come in. He introduced her to Jim and explained they'd need some signatures notarized. She nodded and quietly left to grab her tablet and coffee. We settled back down while Penny got things ready. She didn't speak much, but it was obvious. Whatever she thought of my wife, it wasn't good. I already considered her my ex, even if the paperwork didn't yet agree. We went over the separation papers, completed the power of attorney. All the documents were signed and sealed. The trusts were created, with my mother and the lawyer as trustees. I handed over the letters I'd written to my kids. Then I stood. I shook their hands. Penny offered a soft, "I'm sorry," and it sounded sincere. But strangely, I didn't feel grief. My life had ended, just a day after the moment that truly ended it. I stepped outside. The sky was still overcast, still carried that gloom, but somehow, it no longer felt like the world was collapsing. I couldn't explain exactly what pushed me over the edge. I walked into the bank, withdrew every cent from my savings, closed the account, and left only what remained in checking untouched. Afterward, I climbed into my pickup, turned the key, and made my way to the gas station. I filled the main tank, topped off the reserve tank in the bed, and added 2 5-gallon jerry cans for good measure. Then I drove over to a low-key internet cafe not far away. Inside, I ordered a coffee and a muffin, opened my laptop, and connected to the local Wi-Fi network. I sent the files, first to her parents, then to my own mother, followed by several media personalities, and finally to a couple of local news stations. When that was done, I headed to the front office of the Sharks and then to the NFL Players Association. I froze all our credit cards and reported them as missing. After finishing the last sip of my drink, I rose from my seat and stepped out into the clearing afternoon. March in Cicero is no friend to the soul, drenched in cold, dulled by overcast skies, and haunted by winter's lingering grip. It felt about right. Around 2 in the afternoon, I turned the truck toward the east without any clear destination in mind. I drove for nearly 7 hours before stopping at a nondescript roadside motel, paid in cash for a room, and called it a night. I was back on the road early the next day, though I barely slept, and kept driving for another 6 hours. Eventually, I rolled into a quiet place called Golden Beach, Maryland, resting on the banks of the Patuxent River. It was clearly a summer town, but in March, it felt like a ghost village. I parked outside a place called Sally's and stepped inside. The road was about to end, figuratively and literally, so I'd need to choose a direction soon. The land across the river gave way to the far shore, and past that loomed Delaware. Beyond that stretched the Atlantic, and unless my truck had suddenly acquired the ability to float, I was nearly out of road. Kidding, sort of. Anyway, I pulled out an old road atlas and walked into the cafe. There weren't many people inside, just a few scattered diners as lunchtime approached. Near the entrance, a corkboard was plastered with community notices: jobs, babysitting services, dogs needing homes, and used cars for sale. One flyer in particular grabbed my attention. It advertised a studio apartment for rent. 1 bedroom, a compact living area, a small kitchen, and a shower. Quiet street. No alcohol or smoking allowed. Rent was $135 per month, due in cash and up front. Utilities and Wi-Fi were included, plus 1 parking space. References, welcome. I took the slip from the board and scanned the room. Only 4 patrons or so were scattered around. At the far end of the counter sat an elderly man by himself. I took a spot a few stools away. A black woman in a server's uniform approached me with a welcoming smile. Her name tag read, Sally. "Well, hey there, sweetie. What can I get you?" she asked, her tone bright and warm. I held up the flyer. "Know anything about this place?" She didn't bother to look down at the paper. Her eyes stayed on mine, her smile never fading, as she gave me a once-over with quiet precision. Then she replied, "Looking for somewhere to land, are you?" I nodded. "Something temporary. Maybe some work, too." She nodded slightly, as though she'd already made a decision. Then she pulled out her phone and dialed a number. After a couple rings, someone answered. "Hey, May. Got someone here I think you'll want to meet. Seems all right. Might be what you're after." She ended the call and tucked the phone back into her apron. With a chuckle, she tapped the device gently. "Sometimes these things cause more trouble than they solve," she said, flashing a sly grin. Then she asked, "Hungry? It's getting to be that time." "Yeah, actually. I'll take a roast beef sandwich, side salad with ranch, and a sweet tea." "Coming right up, hun," she said with a cheerful nod before disappearing into the kitchen. I sat there, curious how all this was going to unfold. When the meal came, it surpassed expectations. Tender roast beef, a crisp salad, and a surprise side of creamy coleslaw that was just right. I was sipping my second glass of tea, nearly finished with my food, when the cafe's screen door creaked open, and my future, as it would turn out, walked through it. A woman of East Asian descent entered, probably in her early to mid-40s. She stood around 5'2", lean, athletic, and graceful. The man with her looked significantly older, somewhere in his 60s, but he moved like a younger man, with an ease and alertness that couldn't be ignored. Tall, maybe 6'3", with a lean build and the kind of weathered authority that suggests he's seen a lot. He looked like he'd stepped straight out of a recruiting campaign. Aviator shades, a snug Marina t-shirt, well-worn jeans. Every move was deliberate. He led the woman to a stool on my left, then circled around to take the seat on my right. He pulled off his sunglasses, tilted his cap back, and fixed his gaze directly on me. "Don't be shy. Sit wherever you like," I said, dryly motioning to the rows of vacant seats along the counter. A half-dozen were free, and there were at least 10 open tables. It was clear this wasn't a chance encounter. Sally had set this in motion, and these two hadn't just wandered in. I met the man's stare head-on. He didn't blink. Then the woman addressed me. "Hi there. My name's May Lowell, and this here's my husband, Joshua. Joshua, say hello." He muttered something barely audible, eyes fixed on me like he was studying a bug through glass. While May kept speaking, my attention shifted her way. She extended her hand. I grasped it. Our handshake was firm. Then she got right back to her questions. "What's your name? Where'd you come from, and why are you here?" She pressed on. I exhaled slowly, slid my wallet from my pocket, and flipped it open to my license. I introduced myself, offering a streamlined version of my story, sanding down the rough parts. But May didn't stop there. "You married?" I gave a slight nod. "Yes, ma'am." "Kids?" she asked, eyes narrowing. Another pause. "Yes, ma'am." "Where are they now?" Something stirred in me. Agitation, probably. "No idea. Don't much care," I said, meeting her gaze. "I haven't broken any laws. Maybe I've stepped outside what some folks call decent, but I sleep just fine. You've got my ID, and I figure you've got friends who can check me out. Go ahead. But if this turns into an interrogation, I'm done. I'm not here for that. I keep my promises. Maybe I've lost what little honor I had left, but I've still got that. I've lived through worse. A lot worse. Push me, and it won't take much to snap." "Jim," a voice interrupted me, deep, commanding, like thunder from nowhere. "That's enough." I spun around. Joshua had spoken. His expression hadn't changed, but something in his stare had. He was truly looking at me now. May went quiet. Something behind her eyes shifted too. Then Joshua spoke again. "Rent's $150 a month. Cash only. Due the first of every month." He scanned the room. "This is the last unit we've got. Prices are up now. Spring brings folks in. But I said $150, and that stands. I don't go back on my word." He faced me directly. "If you're still interested, follow us over, take a look. If it feels right, we'll seal it with a handshake." That part threw me. I raised an eyebrow. "A handshake?" He nodded. "Like I said, my word." I took a moment, then nodded back. "All right. Let's check it out." I waved for the bill. Sally brought a slip of paper and dropped it on the counter. I blinked at it. "512?" I asked. She grinned. "Taxes in. That all?" "Yup." Her smile grew. I pulled my wallet again and set down an 11, a 10, and a single. $11, I said. Still smiling, she scooped up the bills. "Nice tip. Thanks." Sally nodded toward the Lowells and turned back to the register. We stepped outside. Joshua gave a slight nod to two deputies sipping coffee, then made his way to his vehicle. It was a slick black Rubicon Sahara, 4-door, lifted, fitted with oversized tires and a heavy-duty front winch. "Follow us," he called back. He opened the passenger door and helped May up, steadying her as she climbed the running board. Before shutting the door, he said something low, kissed her on the cheek, and smiled. It was the first time I'd seen him smile. The moment passed quick. His face turned stone again as he rounded to the driver's side. He glanced my way once before climbing in and starting the engine. I jumped into my truck, backed out, and followed. Hard to lose him. The Jeep's rear window had a huge decal, the Marine Corps emblem front and center, with an American flag on the left and a faded South Vietnamese one on the right. Inside, a flag hung behind each front seat. Nothing else cluttered the cabin. He drove for about 12 minutes, eventually turning off toward the river. A narrow drive wound to a quiet spot. 10 raised bungalows in 2 rows flanking a slim paved road that ended at a small marina. They called the place Marina Hideaway. About 3 dozen boat slips stretched into the water. A low building with a covered porch faced the river. 4 floating gas pumps bobbed nearby, beside a concrete pier. To the right, weathered barns lined up beside a boat ramp sloping to the shore. They stopped beside the last unit on the right, a pale blue bungalow with white shutters perched on stilts behind the final barn. It sat just a bit closer to the river than the others. They parked, and I pulled in next to them. An older couple stood a few yards off watching me step out. I barely noticed them. My eyes were locked on the house. It stood about 8 feet off the ground, a staircase leading to a tight front porch. A ramp zigzagged up from the back, climbing 4 feet, doubling back, then ending at the veranda. The Lowells took the stairs. I went for the ramp, noting the sturdy construction beneath my boots. Concrete pilings, non-slip deck boards, built to hold. I reached the top just as they turned to face me. They welcomed me inside as the door creaked open. Just past the threshold stretched a slim corridor. On one side it branched into a tight, functional kitchen. On the other, a modest bathroom where a shower was neatly fitted into a corner. At the far end, the hallway forked. To the left, a bedroom with windows looking out over the river and a few scattered buildings. To the right, a living area with a view of soft hills and a thin line of trees. Every window that faced outside was shielded with shutters and led to a wraparound porch. Both the bedroom and the living room were equipped with ceiling fans that turned in slow, idle circles. In the living space, a small wood stove stood independently in one corner. There wasn't any central heating or cooling system. The ceiling hung low, yet the cabin gave off a cozy, tightly sealed feel. It had the kind of charm suited for a quiet retreat shared with someone close. The whole place couldn't have been more than 200 square feet, but you weren't supposed to think too hard about the space. That kind of serenity belonged to the past. Jim gave a slight shiver and faced the Lowells. "I'll take responsibility for him," he said. "Hold on," came the reply. "And how exactly do you plan to cover the costs?" "Do you have employment lined up?" someone else added. "Not just yet, sir," I answered, "but I'm flexible." "What sort of work do you have available?" Joshua gave me another once-over, then flicked his eyes to Jim, quietly weighing something. "Maybe. What kind of experience do you have?" "I'm licensed as an aircraft technician," I told him. "I also have solid skills in carpentry and forklift handling." That response seemed to shift Joshua's view of me, noticeably. "All right," he said. "Let's say you'll be paid under the table, minimum wage, in cash. You'll start out at Hideaway Marina. We have t-shirts with our logo. Wear those with a pair of jeans. Some of the local churches and charity groups may need help from time to time as well. You'll assist them too. All cash jobs." He paused, studying me. "Don't take advantage of their kindness. If we hear complaints, that's it. You're on your own. Understand?" Jim chuckled. "Loud and clear, boss." Joshua gave a short nod. "Be at the diner tomorrow morning. Long building. Can't miss it. Show up a half-hour early. You'll pay for your own breakfast. We'll see what you're made of." He extended his hand. "Do we have a deal?" he asked. "Deal," Jim said, gripping it firmly. That handshake was the beginning of it all. Eventually, they opened up to me. In time, they came to treat me like part of the family. Joshua had once served as a recon Marine in Vietnam. During his deployment, he helped rescue Mai and her relatives from grave danger. They were first brought to the Philippines, then later to the United States with assistance from Catholic organizations. Joshua, clearly moved by the young woman he'd saved, kept in touch. After he came back stateside, he found her again, this time in Oceanside, California. They reunited, and he proposed. He even converted to Catholicism, something that pleased her family but alienated his own. They married soon after and relocated to Paris Island, not a popular decision with her relatives. Joshua served 2 more overseas deployments, one during Desert Storm and another he never spoke about. He eventually achieved the rank of sergeant major in the infantry and left the service with full honors. During that time, they raised 4 children, 3 sons and 1 daughter. All 4 enlisted in the military. 3 joined the Marines, while the 4th broke the mold by enrolling at the Air Force Academy. Their daughter also went into the Marines. She earned a degree from the Naval Academy, practiced military law, and eventually stepped away from service as a lieutenant to start her own law firm. She later entered a committed relationship with a pediatrician from Baltimore. As for me, I slowly began rebuilding. I toughened up, in body and mind. The gentler weather was a relief after the biting cold back in northern Illinois, and I started to like it. My background in mechanics and tool work, especially my aircraft technician license, quickly earned me a good name around town, especially with my employer. Eventually, I was officially hired, promoted, and began leaving my past behind. Not completely, but enough. I even launched a small construction and renovation company. I brought on 2 young workers, one just out of prison, the other freshly separated from the military. We built a local reputation for doing solid, reliable work. The Lowell's younger kids would stop by frequently, and over time, I developed a strong bond with each of them. 2.5 years after arriving, I was firmly rooted in the community. Joshua valued my reliability and craftsmanship. I was earning nearly $20 an hour and was more than an employee. I had become something like family. But the moment that truly anchored me among them came when I finally opened up about my past. Mai listened quietly, eyes wide. "How could a woman do that to someone?" she asked, shaken. "What kind of person is she? And she has children too? Oh, Jim, I didn't mean—" Her face shifted. "Wait, that means you had kids too?" I nodded. "There are 2 people I helped raise and loved with everything I had. Whether they're mine by blood, I can't say. I'd have to trust a liar to know for sure." She said nothing. "I'm sorry, Mai. I'm not past it yet." Joshua had been watching silently the entire time. He didn't interrupt, but it was clear he was taking it all in. Finally, he said, "You're carrying a lot, son. I'm not here to judge the choices you made. You didn't have many to pick from." "Joshua?" Mai said softly. "Yes, love." She exhaled. "The thing is, he made a decision. He stuck with it. And at the time, it was the only road open. I'm not blaming you for your choice, but you're not well. I've mentioned this before, and yet you've done nothing to address it. In the 3 years I spent living here, their family all but took me in as one of their own. Sure, people whispered about my decisions, but they grasped the reasons behind them. Looking back now, I see they weren't wrong. I was a wreck. The only people I interacted with were the Lowells and a handful of church members I cautiously allowed into my life. I mostly kept to myself, detached and shut off from the world, and that was largely because of Linda. Linda, who was selfish, vain, and utterly unfeeling. She tossed her marriage aside for a single night with another self-absorbed predator. And why? Because she believed she was owed it. She thought she deserved it. A woman who never once considered my place in the equation, who prioritized her fleeting whims over her husband, her children, and her home. Why? Because she wanted to. Because she told herself it was fate. But why, really? I still don't know. I've tried to make sense of it, tried to unravel the twisted logic. I've agonized over the decision to leave, dissected it from every possible angle. And even now, after all this time, I'm no closer to answers than I was that first night. But at least I got out. I escaped that waking nightmare, and I've tried, truly tried, to bury the bitterness and disgust she left in her wake. I like to think I've started to mend. Yet here I am, 3 years on, still isolated, still weighed down by what she did to me, and by the fact that I let it happen. Most days, I hardly even wonder if anyone's still looking for me. And frankly, I wouldn't care much if they were. But something shifted, something that reminded me I'm not beyond redemption. That Sunday morning after church service, I went into town. I'd stopped by a little market. I hadn't bothered applying for a concealed carry permit, so I no longer carried my Python revolver. Still, my pistol and both of my rifles remained registered in Maryland. Instead, I kept a standard police baton on me, a collapsible steel rod, just in case. I had it tucked away as I headed toward my truck. That's when I saw them. Two men cornering a young woman trying to grab her bag, her keys, everything, while she struggled to unlock her Toyota Supra. She screamed, fought back, but no one else intervened. Except me. Jim. The guy who just can't keep his head down. I dropped the 2 grocery bags on my truck's hood and dashed across the parking lot, baton in hand. I snapped it open as I ran. My shout caught their attention, and they spun around to face me. That's when I saw the gun, but it was too late to stop. I swung hard and cracked the first guy's wrist just as he raised the weapon, a sickening snap as the bone gave way. Without missing a beat, I drove into the second one, slamming him against the Supra's hood. The first guy stumbled after him. The loud exhale as the air was forced from their lungs was almost satisfying. Their cries, one in agony from a shattered wrist, the other from what was likely broken ribs, felt like a crude kind of justice. I was still catching my breath, heart pounding, when I turned to look at the woman. She was small, maybe 5'3", lean and athletic. Not striking like Linda had been, but there was a natural beauty to her. She had delicate features, a modest figure, long legs. Her brown hair was tied back in a ponytail, and her black-framed glasses gave her the look of a librarian. But what truly stood out was the fear on her face. She wasn't looking at me. She was focused on the back of the car, frantically pulling at the rear door. She was yelling now, eyes wild with panic. I pulled out my phone and hit a contact. "Hey, Jim. What's going on?" came Michael Lowell's voice, the younger son. "Mike," I said quickly, "I'm at the grocery store. Looks like an attempted robbery, possibly an assault." Then it dawned on me. "There's a kid in the back seat," I added. "We may be looking at a kidnapping." "Stay put. We're on our way," Mike replied, and the line went dead. I turned to keep the 2 guys in check. I picked up the dropped pistol and ordered them to lie flat, arms out, just like in the shows. Then I stepped over to the woman again. She was still struggling with the door, hands trembling. I gently nudged her aside and popped the door open with ease. She reached in and scooped up a little girl, couldn't have been older than 5. "Are you okay?" I asked. Clutching her daughter close, she nodded, tears streaking her cheeks. The girl whimpered at first, but gradually relaxed. She wiped her eyes and gave me a small, watery smile. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much." "They were going to take my car, my daughter." "Not while I'm around," I said, giving her a crooked grin. She gave a sob that turned into a smile, then asked, "Are you a cop?" That question caught me off guard, sparked something in me. A flicker of humor, long dormant. I actually laughed. "No," I said, still smiling, "but I play one on TV." Her smile faltered. Honestly, she looked more spooked than before. And right then, red and blue lights lit up the parking lot, sirens wailing as Mike and his partner skidded to a stop. They jumped out with weapons drawn. I lifted my hands, holding the gun by the barrel so it wouldn't be seen as a threat. Mike took it and slipped it into an evidence bag. "What the hell happened, Jim?" I gave him the short version, then turned to the woman with an apologetic expression. "Sorry," I said. "That joke landed pretty badly." And I meant it. In a single instant, everything shifted once more. I quickly introduced myself, scrambling to recover from my impulsive remark, and tried to sound calm, even friendly. "I'm Jim Carlyle," I said with an uneasy smile. "Sorry if I startled you, or said something wrong. Are you both all right?" Her gaze locked on me, wary and uncertain, as if she were trying to decide whether to trust what she heard. Around us, 4 uniformed officers kept the scene under control. An ambulance had just pulled up, and the suspects, now in cuffs, were receiving medical attention. A paramedic examined the woman and her young daughter nearby. After several tense minutes, the medics confirmed that both were physically unharmed, though visibly shaken and in need of further observation. The woman kept shifting her eyes between Mike and me. Then, looking straight at Mike, she asked cautiously, "Do you know this man?" Mike responded with a calm, easy grin. "Yeah, I do. He works with my dad and lives close to the marina. You can trust him." She turned back to me, her posture relaxing just a little. "Thank you," she said with a warmth that caught me off guard. "I'm Emma Lindell." The name struck me like a chord from the past. I stared at her, stunned by how much she resembled someone I once knew, someone I'd never forgotten. My daughter. The similarity was haunting. It was as if the past had brushed against the present in one surreal, breathless second. Mike hadn't pieced it together yet. The names, the resemblance. Oblivious, he asked her casually, "Is Linda doing okay?" The mention of that name shattered whatever fragile grip I had. My knees buckled, and I stumbled against her car. Emma gasped and took a step back, clearly startled, as Mike caught my arm. There I was, a grown man, utterly undone. I blinked rapidly, trying to gather myself as reality wavered around the edges. "Linda. No. No, no, please no." At that moment, the realization dawned on Mike. He grabbed my shoulders and gave me a firm shake. "Jim, get a grip. That's not your family." His voice sliced through the haze. Then he seemed to remember Emma, standing there confused and concerned. He steadied me and turned toward her. "Jim's been through a lot," he said gently. "His ex-wife was named Linda. His daughter's name was Emma, too. That's all I'll say. But believe me, Jim's one of the good ones. I'd trust him with my life." His words hit me harder than the shock had. I never knew Mike thought that highly of me. I always figured he just put up with me. I stood up straighter, still shaken, but trying to regain some dignity. I mumbled an apology and made an awkward attempt to leave. But the moment wasn't finished with me yet. My voice cracked, and I knew I must have looked like a complete mess. I turned to go, but Emma reached out and stopped me with a gentle hand. "Mr. Carlyle, it's all right. Just breathe. You're okay." Her calm tone settled something inside me. I exhaled slowly as Mike took a step back to give us space. That's when a police officer walked over, clipboard in hand, asking for our statements and contact info. We gave what was needed, and throughout it all, little Linda studied me like I was something alien, strange and untrustworthy. Once we were done, Emma turned to me with a question that caught me off guard. "Would you want to grab some lunch?" She smiled. "Ever been to Sally's?" Mike shot me a knowing glance. I could feel myself blushing as I admitted, "Yeah, actually, it's one of my favorites." That was all Mike needed to hear. His grin stretched wide. I gave him a look, and he let out a chuckle. "Go on, Jim. Take your time." He walked away, still grinning like he knew something I didn't. What was he playing at? I turned back to Emma, who was watching me thoughtfully. She tilted her head. "Well?" she asked. "I'm starving, and I know my daughter could eat a whole pizza by herself." Then, with a playful smirk, she added, "And since you're a guy, I'll bet you're hungry too." She smiled. "My treat. After everything today, it's the least I can do." I hadn't felt this way in years, not since that night. Something stirred inside me, something other than pain or loss. It was so unfamiliar, it almost frightened me. But I thought, maybe this is what healing feels like. So I went with them. Sally's wasn't far, just a short stroll, maybe 300 yards. In a town this small, nothing was ever out of reach. I tucked the groceries into my truck bed, locked the lid, and we started walking. Inside the diner, the cool air brushed against my warm skin. I wasn't sure if I was nervous or just overwhelmed. Sally saw us the moment we walked in. She waved us over and pointed to an open booth. She was all smiles, the same bubbly woman who ran the counter like clockwork and always saved spots for her regulars. "You two going to ask for the hero discount?" she teased. I blinked, confused. But Emma laughed and replied, "Word gets around, huh, Sally?" Without missing a beat, Sally said, "Mike called already, told me all about the arrest. Looks like Mr. Good Guy here is becoming a bit of a local legend." She grinned at me. "Knew you were one of the good ones the first time I saw you." She was clearly enjoying herself, and I couldn't help but feel the small-town charm coming at me in full force. That feeling only grew stronger when two elderly men walked in, spotted us, and headed straight for our table. "How's it going, Sal? Did those pies just come out of the oven?" the first man inquired. "Yup, 2 apple and 1 peach piping hot," Sal said with a laugh. "Fresh as it gets, Rufus." Rufus grinned as he took off his faded Vietnam vet cap and extended a solid handshake. "You've done us proud, kid." "Good to see someone young stepping up when it matters," he said. "Heard you had a weapon on you." As we shook hands, I felt something unspoken pass between us. His grip was firm, grounding, and strangely comforting. A second man stepped forward to join the conversation. "Always said Joshua had a knack for reading people," he remarked, taking over the handshake. He acknowledged my friends with a smile and a polite nod. Then the two men strolled off toward the counter. Sal, clearly basking in the moment, practically glowed with satisfaction. "Well," she said, voice brimming with excitement, "seems like you two have become local legends overnight, and that makes my place the unofficial base for our hometown hero." Emma chuckled. "Can we eat now, Sal, before this guy's head doesn't fit through the door?" My cheeks turned red as I mumbled apologies to both of them. Sal, still amused, suggested a chicken plate, served with fries, sautéed spinach, and a small side salad. Technically, it was the Tuesday lunch special, but at 2:30 in the afternoon, she was happy to make an exception. "If that's what you're craving, consider it done," she said with a playful wink. I nodded, and Emma gave her nod of agreement as well. "And for Linda, let's do mac and cheese and some nuggets," Emma added. For a brief moment, Linda smiled. A soft, flickering thing, but it faded quickly, her expression guarded again as she glanced in my direction. Emma didn't seem fazed by it. As Sal headed to the kitchen, Emma leaned forward, her tone more intimate now. She shared that Angelina, Mike's sister, along with Camille, Mike's wife, and, well, the person I knew all too well, had been orchestrating a behind-the-scenes setup. They figured it might help me find closure. But Emma, to her credit, was focused solely on her daughter. She wasn't looking for romance, just trying to get through life one day at a time. And somehow, that journey had brought her to me. "So, Mr. Dechihiro," she said with a teasing glint in her eye, "you've learned a bit about me, but I've heard plenty about you. Time to balance the scales." She dove into her story. "I'm 29, been divorced for 3 years now, not that it meant much in the end. My ex was abusive, he ended up in prison." Her voice dropped, softened for Linda's sake. "He passed away last year. One of Mike's sisters took on my case. It was her first as a solo attorney. I'm a CPA, specializing in estates and investments. I run my own small firm." She smiled faintly. "Well, really it's just me, my best friend and our secretary, who also happens to be a notary. We've been doing this for a little over 3 years now. So when those 2 idiots tried to rob or kidnap us, whatever it was, they interrupted a pretty normal day." Her voice broke, the emotion catching up with her. The shock had worn off, and the reality was finally sinking in. I got up, walked to her side, crouched down, and wrapped her in a hug. She clung to me, trembling and crying into my shoulder. Then Linda began to sob too. I reached for her and pulled her in. The three of us stayed like that, connected, holding on to each other. And right then, something changed. For the first time in over 3 years, I felt whole again. Real. Alive. And it scared the hell out of me. I didn't think that version of me even existed anymore. I looked down at this woman, and the little girl between us, and all I could think was, I don't want to let this go. That's when I noticed Sal watching us. She stood nearby, her face serious, the usual twinkle in her eye gone. Without saying a word, she placed 2 drinks on the table, iced tea and apple juice, and backed away. I started to explain, but Emma beat me to it with a quiet apology. It's just been a lot, emotionally, she whispered. Sal nodded slowly, understanding in her eyes. I returned to my seat, sliding it just a little closer to Emma and Linda. Sal's warmth returned, and as she turned to leave, she gave me a knowing wink. I straightened my shirt, took a sip of the tea, and met Emma's gaze. Okay, I said. My turn. I started by explaining my odd reaction the first time we met. It threw me when you introduced yourself and your daughter. Their names match my wife and my little girl's, just reversed. It shook me up. I wasn't ready for that. I apologized again. Then I shared my story. I didn't hide from the ugly parts, though I left out the most brutal details. I gave her the raw truth as plainly as I could. She came to understand that my wife had betrayed me, humiliated me, left me in the most painful way imaginable. I admitted I hadn't handled it well. I should have done better. I knew that. But at the time, I couldn't see beyond the heartbreak. Could I have chosen a different path? Absolutely. That regret has haunted me every day since. Still, I doubted it would have changed anything, not for her and not for me. I gave her everything, and she walked away without looking back. As I spoke, it felt like the years of grief were beginning to lift, like fog burning off in the morning sun. The pain was still there, but it didn't feel quite as heavy. I know it sounds cliché, but it truly felt like something out of a novel. Emma, from everything I could see, had no connection to my past. She was just a stranger offering me a safe space to speak freely. Or so I thought. But as I went on, her expression began to shift. Her eyes widened, then narrowed. I could see her processing every word, something in her demeanor tightening as she listened. Over time, I came to see that this was simply how she navigated both her professional and personal spheres. Beyond the workplace, her life centered almost entirely around her daughter, and even at the office, much of her attention remained fixed on young Linda. Eventually, I found myself drawn into that orbit, but not right away. Early on, during our first real conversations, she listened intently as I opened up about everything I'd gone through, the heartbreak, the decisions that had gutted me. I explained how I'd willingly relinquished nearly half of what we owned without resistance. I shared how I'd committed the remainder of our resources to my children's education, how I'd stepped away from that chapter of my life, and how she, my former partner, had stepped out of mine just as easily. I knew I was repeating myself, circling the same old pain, and I noticed a trace of worry flicker in her eyes. Perhaps she was wondering if I was coming undone. I paused and looked her straight in the eye. There was something there, soft, maybe even compassionate. I glanced toward little Linda and was completely unprepared for what came next. She stared at me, her face calm and voice earnest, and said, "I'm not the bad Linda like she is." Then, with childlike composure, she took a sip of her apple juice and kept watching me. Something shifted inside me. My mind drifted to my daughter Emma. I couldn't help wondering what she might say if she were in this room. I turned back to her mother and caught a brief smile just before she managed to hide it. Then she spoke. "Mr. Panissa Carlyle, I owe you an apology. I judged you unfairly. I didn't grasp how deeply everything had affected you. But you have to heal. You have to find your way through this. No one else can do that for you." She leaned a little closer. "I mean that. I've been where you are. I made it through. She hesitated, a slight curve playing on her lips. Maybe our paths will cross again someday. Then the food arrived, and we started eating, the conversation shifting to lighter things, what life was like in Golden Beach. She'd moved there over 4 years ago, not long after her husband had been arrested. Linda had just turned 5 then. After we finished dinner, she downed the last of her iced tea and gave me a thoughtful look. Well, Mr. Quartet Carlyle, I really hope we see each other again. Thank you. Truly. She began to gather her things, her phone, her purse, her keys. I've never really understood why women always seem to scatter their belongings the moment they sit down. But I digress. She stood, called for Linda, and extended her hand in farewell. The handshake lingered just a second longer than necessary, and her eyes held something she didn't put into words. She smiled again and walked toward the door. I remained standing for a moment before easing back into my seat, only then realizing she'd left me to take care of the bill. That was classic Minx. I chuckled. Sally came over with the check and a smirk. "Don't mess it up, sugar," she said. "She's different. She's worth the wait." I paid the tab and left, not entirely sure what I was feeling, only that, whatever it was the best I'd felt in a long time. A rare, quiet peace settled over me. The days slipped by, then weeks, folding into months. I ran into Emma now and then, and even managed to take her and Linda out for ice cream a couple of times. Slowly, bit by bit, I felt a flicker of myself returning. The next morning, I went to my usual spot at the Marina Cafe for breakfast. Later, we launched 2 boats and did some upkeep for customers expected that weekend. The week moved quickly, and by Thursday someone mentioned a barbecue at the Lowell house the following evening. They told me I was welcome to come. So, Friday barbecue it was. Fortunately, it wasn't Lent, so I figured I'd treat myself, eat well, maybe have 1 too many drinks, and sleep it off on Saturday. It sounded like just what I needed. Friday morning rolled around, and I started the day with breakfast. I was unaware of what was beginning to unfold around me, though things were shifting behind the scenes. The families who owned the boats showed up, and I took the lead, walking them through what we'd done, how everything worked, hours of operation, and refueling logistics. These were regulars, weekend visitors, not year-round locals. Once they were squared away, I dove back into some mechanical work until about 4 in the afternoon. Then I clocked out, now full-time, cleaned up, and headed home to change. I threw on a clean t-shirt and jeans. It was just a barbecue, but I wanted to show up looking respectable. I was practically part of the family now. I made my way to the Lowells. Their place was a sprawling ranch-style log home, about 5,000 square feet, with a wide porch that wrapped around the whole house. In the backyard, there was a patio, a hot tub by the pool, and the smell of barbecue smoke hanging in the air. The fire pit glowed faintly as people mingled. Maya welcomed me with warmth, kissed me on the cheek, and guided me into the crowd of relatives, friends, partners, and kids. Almost instantly, I caught the eye of their daughter, Maya Angelina, the youngest. A respected lawyer and former Marine, she was said to be involved with a young doctor. Everyone hoped it was something lasting. But tonight, she was alone, and her attention was on me. "Jim, how have you been?" she asked. "I think we've only seen each other 2, maybe 3 times in the past few years, but I remember you clearly. And everything I've heard since then has only reinforced my first impression. Some of it's heartbreaking, a little unsettling, but it hasn't changed how I see you." She paused for a beat. "And someone very close to me has taken a real interest in you. Can we talk?" I was stunned. This wasn't someone I knew well, just someone I'd always thought highly of. What exactly was she referring to? What had she heard? And from whom? And who, exactly, was this person she meant? She repeated her question. "Can we talk?" I nodded. "Yes, of course. Let's talk." "Yes, please. If you're all right with it, I'd really like to begin now," I said, my voice wavering. "I've got more questions than clarity. Can we sit down and talk?" She offered a warm smile and gently took my hand. Mike and Camille walked over and joined us, their faces kind and understanding, as if they could sense my unease. Together, we made our way to a small table tucked beneath the wide canopy of an old tree. As we sat down, there were hugs and handshakes all around, followed by drinks, cold Budweisers for Mike and me, crisp white wine for the women. "Why is it always wine for the ladies?" Mike said with a grin. "Here, Bud, you'll want this, trust me, but go slow." I took a deep pull, steeling myself. Maya Angelina began to speak. "Let me be direct. About a year and a half ago I was given a task," she said, pausing for a beat. "You know she's in the Marines. I had a gut instinct about who was really pulling the strings." My head turned instinctively, searching for Joshua. I spotted him chatting with a few others, Emma among them. He looked over briefly, expression blank and unreadable, then turned back to his group. That was enough. I understood. "Pay attention, soldier," she said firmly. She dove in head first. "Like I mentioned, she's a Marine. My job was to investigate your situation. I've been in touch with your lawyer, L.V. Vorsterns, acting in your interest. Don't worry. Your location is still a mystery to everyone, and no one knows what you're dealing with exactly. But trust me, we've uncovered far more than we had before." L.V. Witta didn't say anything beyond what you already shared, but he confirmed it all. Then he posed the question I had already been thinking about. He never once asked where you were, how you were doing, or if you planned to come back, nothing even close. So I brought up what life was like back in Cicero, Illinois. And what I found out, well, it's just between us. Not even my folks know. At that moment, Robert, her younger companion, approached with a soft smile. He leaned in and kissed the top of her head. "Everything all right, sweetheart?" "All good," she said with a smile, "but I've barely begun my briefing." "All right then, just let me know when you're ready," he said with a wink and wandered off. Maya watched him leave, a small shake of her head and a fond smile playing on her lips. I'd love to let him in on all of this, but he's not quite family. Not yet. Maybe someday. She turned her focus back to me, eyes serious once more. "Like I said, I'm the only one who has the whole story. I'm ready to lay it all out, if that's all right with you. Because around this table, we're family now. Whether you know it or not, that means you too. So, are you ready?" A weight gathered in my chest like a coming storm. I could hardly breathe. Mike got to his feet and gestured toward my drink. "Go ahead," he said, finishing his bottle and heading off to grab more. He came back carrying 2 fresh Budweisers and a bottle of iced tea. "You might have hit your beer limit. Time to rehydrate," he joked, settling back into his seat. I turned to Angie, what everyone in the family called her. "I need to hear everything," I said. "I mean, how bad can it be? I'm not in jail yet, so let's tear the bandage off." Her knowing smile didn't fade. "She got a strange thrill from the whole thing," Angie went on. "When she returned, she already had it mapped out. Her goal was to push you over the edge and then come back like some kind of hero. But something was off that day. She wasn't herself. The moment she stepped into the house, panic gripped her. She freaked, thought you were dead or had taken your own life. She called 911, rambling about what she saw. It barely made sense. She kept repeating one thing over and over. The smell, the smell. The dispatcher told her help was coming and to stay on the line. But she hung up. Instead, she called her parents in a frenzy. By the time the cops showed up, she was hysterical. They tried to calm her, called in more backup. She wouldn't stop screaming about blood and that awful stench. They put her in the back seat of a squad car. When the second team and the shift sergeant got there, one officer stayed with her while the others went inside. After about 20 minutes, they came out again. The gloves came off, and one of them sealed the front door with crime scene tape. Then the sergeant came over with another cop. He just said one word to her. I got the whole story from someone extremely credible. He said their faces were caught somewhere between disgust and frustration. And then, just like that, she snapped out of it. She started to laugh, straightened up. Jim saw the shift, and he smiled too. Ketchup. The officers were baffled, and visibly annoyed. They couldn't make sense of it. That's right when her parents pulled in, and that's when things really took a turn. Your messages and emails had already started circulating. Friends, relatives, co-workers, everyone was calling. You stirred up a storm so huge, she couldn't stop it even if she tried. And then, of course, the media showed up. Angie's eyes glimmered with something like admiration. "You really pulled it off, Jim," she said. Mike and Camille both turned to look at me then, and I could see the change in their faces, like they were finally seeing the real me for the first time. Camilla's mouth hung open in disbelief, and Mike barely managed a stunned, "Holy crap." Angie cleared her throat and stepped into the silence. The police gave her a stern lecture for making a bogus report and wasting their time, then left. The media, though? They didn't back off so easily. Her parents dragged her back inside and flung open all the windows, desperate to clear the air. Then came the reckoning. Her parents, furious and bewildered, pressed her for answers about the catastrophe they were certain someone had caused. It took time, but eventually, the truth spilled out. Her mother was floored. Her father was incandescent with rage, angry at her for what she'd done, and furious at you for vanishing without a word. And the fallout wasn't just confined to the family. Social media went wild, headlines popped up. The rumor mill among friends and extended relatives went into overdrive. That chaos? It was only the start. LV got a call and, sticking to his prepared story, claimed he had no clue where you were. From there, everything unraveled. Her father nearly snapped. Weeks went by with no word from you, and he insisted she file for divorce. She was crushed. She resisted as long as she could, surviving on the money you'd left behind. The legal proceedings dragged on for almost 2 years. That's right. The divorce has been final for 6 months now. She's drowning in debt and had to sell the house to avoid losing it entirely. Her job? Gone, for several reasons. She began drinking hard, surrounding herself with all the wrong people. Eventually, her parents, your former in-laws, stepped in. The courts granted them custody of the kids. Your mom sees the children regularly. Linda? Barely at all. Just last week she checked into a rehab center. She's really struggling. Your in-laws are exhausted. They're raising the children and trying to cope with their daughter's freefall. Rehab gave them a bit of breathing room, but they're still under enormous strain. Your mother-in-law's health is slipping. Your father-in-law's blood pressure has been spiking. The mood was heavy, like the air itself was too thick to breathe. That's when Joshua and Mai sat down with the rest of us, side by side. Joshua picked up the thread. "Everyone in your family knows now," he said in a low voice. "Mai and I, we're still in the dark. It's up to you, son. How much you want to tell us?" There was weight in his words. "You've been dodging this for too long," he added. "You're not the only one who got caught up in this. Some of us got dragged in against our will. Others, they're still trying to help." Then Emma stepped next to me. She didn't crowd me, but her presence was grounding. I could feel the pressure closing in, like everything I'd built was moments from falling apart. But how had they not tracked me down? I'd changed the registration on my truck, updated my driver's license, even gotten a real job. I paid taxes last year, for God's sake. Mike's face flushed red. "Okay, look, that might be partly on me," he confessed. "When you sent in your updated info, I made a couple of quiet calls to the DMV. You did everything right, but somehow those forms just got lost in the shuffle. There were formal search requests too," he added, glancing away. "They disappeared, never got followed up on." Maya, Angelina, chimed in again. "LV filed your taxes for the first 2 years. So yeah, you owe him a bit of gratitude. But last year you did it all yourself, and honestly, no one's chasing you anymore. Not the IRS, not your in-laws, Not the police. Maybe your mom, though. She's still carrying a lot. She misses your dad. Mostly she's just angry. At the world. At everyone. She paused, her tone gentler. Except for you, I think. She won't accept any part in the blame. I'm sorry, Jim. That's just how it is. Emma touched my shoulder with a soft squeeze. I looked into her calm, steady gray eyes. I managed a faint smile. A shiver went through me, not from fear, but from the intense realization that I was, at last, free. Despite everything, there were still people here who cared, people who hadn't given up. I wasn't the same man who had run. I'd changed. I had to pause to really think about what came next. Joshua's voice broke the moment. No more running, son. That's over. I gave him a nod. You're right. No more hiding, I said, sweeping my eyes over the group. It's time to stop avoiding everything. Time to fix what I can. I turned to Emma, motioning toward the river. Can someone stay with Linda for a bit? I need to take a walk with you. Emma turned to the others. Camilla stood up. I'll take care of her. Don't worry. Emma gave her a warm smile. Thanks, Camilla. Thank you too, Mike. She reached for my hand and led me forward. Angelina rose, clasped my hand briefly, then pulled me into a quick, firm hug. She went back to the group and started explaining everything to her parents. Emma and I followed the trail that led north from the house. After about 15, maybe 20 minutes, the trees had swallowed us, and it felt like we'd slipped completely out of sight. We drifted onward until we came across an enormous tree that had collapsed along the riverbank. Its position created a natural resting place, unexpectedly perfect. She guided me toward it, smoothed out her sun-warmed dress, and settled down gracefully, her legs neatly folded beneath her. With a playful glance in my direction, she patted the bark beside her and said, "Sit with me." It felt right, so I did, though my gaze wandered. To the ground, my hands, the woods, anywhere except her face. I kept my eyes from meeting hers. She, meanwhile, closed her own, took in a slow breath, and wore that same mysterious smile that always left me off balance, as though she could anticipate the entire story before I'd even spoken a word. In that moment, something clicked. She wasn't just insightful, she saw through people. I realized I wasn't there out of necessity, but because she had chosen to allow me into her world. It stung a little, that awareness, but it also made perfect sense. Still, I felt compelled to set things right. Once I'd composed myself, I turned toward her. Her face remained tranquil, eyes closed, as if she were patiently awaiting my honesty. I said her name, hoping it would ground me. Emma, there are things I need to tell you. I have to be completely honest, I added. She opened her eyes and faced me squarely. All right. I'm listening. I inhaled deeply, feeling the pressure in my chest, and began to speak. I told her everything, how a single cruel woman had upended my world, and how the choices I made in the aftermath, whether fair or flawed, had left me broken. For more than 3 years, I couldn't look in the mirror without crying. I was lost in every sense. I revealed what Angie had confided in us, along with some things I'd never spoken aloud before. As I talked, I felt like I was hearing the truth of my own story for the first time. I told her how rescuing her and Linda had shifted something inside me, and how just having her near had started to realign my sense of purpose. By the time my words ran out, I was tense, leaning slightly toward her. A new idea was forming, uncertain, yet persistent. She laughed, a bright, melodic laugh that lit up her entire face, and looked straight at me with sparkling eyes. So let me guess. You want to make an honest woman out of me? She teased. Not that I've ever doubted your integrity. There was admiration in her voice, but also something gentler, something that hinted at longing. Her words made my pulse quicken. I took her hands, trying to remain present despite the whirlwind of feelings. It was a bold move, and it surprised her slightly, But she didn't pull away. She waited, breath held. I swallowed and said what was on my mind. I'm thinking of asking Angelina to reach out to LW in Illinois. I want to try for custody of my kids. I don't know exactly where I stand legally, but given her record, jobless, 2 arrests, and currently in rehab, I might have a chance. I want to bring them here. This is home now. My mom's still got good years left, and after everything she's endured, she deserves something better. But to make it all work, I'll need to build a house big enough for everyone. I kept my eyes on hers, watching for any sign of hesitation. She blinked, caught off guard by the clarity and scope of my plan. That's the first time you've genuinely surprised me, she said. But her moment of awe quickly passed. She narrowed her eyes playfully. So let me get this straight. You've got feelings for me? I gave a half smile and a quiet laugh. I think I do. Actually, I know I do. And you're saying Linda and I, my Linda, could be part of your family? That made me smile even more. You got me. I'm pretty sure I love you. Or at the very least, I know I could, if we let it happen. I leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't fiery or dramatic, just real. A gentle, sincere kiss. But she didn't take it lightly. To her, that kiss meant everything. It was her answer. No games. I'm yours, and you're mine. That's settled. Just like that, she'd taken the reins again. I know a phenomenal architect, she said, suddenly all business. His wife and I go way back, so he'll draft the plans practically for free. He'll even handle the permits. Just tell me where you want to break ground. In the meantime, Angelina will speak to LW and start the legal process. You'll probably have to deal with some past paperwork, but we'll figure that out as we go. So, what do you think? She looked positively radiant, like she'd just been handed everything she ever wanted. I lunged for her, and she let out a delighted squeal as we both tumbled into the leaves. Our laughter gave way to tender touches and soft kisses, wrapped up in a moment neither of us wanted to end. Almost an hour later, we headed back toward the gathering, brushing leaves and grass from our clothes. The giggles lingered, but we knew there was more ahead. We shared the news with Joshua and Mia, everything that had happened and all we were hoping to do. Their support came without hesitation. Angie was officially brought on by my lawyer, who graciously offered a family discount. She'd reach out to LW first thing Monday. Joshua and I sat down to work out the details, buying land, building the home, adding a private suite for my mom, complete with a ramp, ladder, and a covered walkway connecting her space to ours. The main house would be 2,500 square feet, with 5 bedrooms, plenty of room for everyone we cared about. I began making concrete plans for the future, giving serious thought to the road ahead. I also proposed to Joshua and Mia that perhaps Linda's parents might want to move into the house I was currently living in. It felt like the least I could offer, especially if they hoped to remain near their grandchildren. I'd always had a soft spot for them, although I wasn't sure if that sentiment was still mutual after everything that had transpired with the kids. Time would eventually reveal the answer. Emma and I sat down with the architect and shared our ideas. He was open and engaged, offered his own suggestions, showed us several concept visuals on his laptop, and gave us a preliminary budget. I left the meeting feeling very encouraged by his input. The estimate was much lower than I had anticipated. That following Monday, I submitted a loan request to the bank to get the project moving. At the same time, Angie contacted LV and one of his associates to review the plan I had put together. He mentioned that I might need to return in person to deal with the matter directly. Since I'd started working at the marina, I hadn't taken a single day off, not even a personal day. As it turned out, I had nearly 4 weeks of paid leave accumulated. Joshua told me not to worry. When the time came, I could take off as much as needed. My job would still be there when I got back. He simply said, family has to come first. Meanwhile, Angie found an intriguing angle for our legal approach, and she, LV, and I stayed in close communication through Skype and email. Emma and I continued having long conversations. But I needed to be completely sure before making any major decisions. This time, I couldn't afford uncertainty. As for little Linda, she was making a real effort to connect with me. Her behavior changed in noticeable ways. She seemed energized whenever I was around and would cling to my hand during our outings. She smiled constantly and laughed with an openness that touched me. She even insisted on nightly hugs and kisses before bed. Her mother and I found ourselves moved by her gestures, and we too began to share more embraces and quiet displays of affection. It hadn't crossed into romance, but there was a growing tenderness. I was still processing everything emotionally, but Emma gave me the time and space I needed. Linda's presence was a steady encouragement. One day she looked up at me and asked, "When are you going to marry my mom? I'm getting really old and I need a dad. You'd be perfect, right?" She was only 5. As for the legal situation, the court process turned out to be much less intimidating than I had feared. I hadn't violated any laws. What I had done might have raised ethical questions, but it wasn't enough to provoke a serious reaction from the authorities. Linda's parents eventually got behind what I was working toward, and to help mend fences, I extended the offer to let them live with us. Technically, it was Angie and LV who relayed the offer. They also explained that I had assumed the couple no longer wanted any contact with me. The truth, though, was that they'd been burned by their lender. They were devastated and genuinely wanted to make amends. In any case, things were moving forward. 3 years had gone by. My situation had stabilized. I had started a modest home renovation and repair business. I now oversaw 2 small teams, each with 3 people, working evenings and weekends. I finally felt grounded. The house had become something I was proud of. It reminded me of building a barn from the ground up. In just 1 weekend, we set the foundation posts. 4 weeks later, the floor, ramp, and staircase were complete. Progress accelerated from there. Within 2 months, we had the structure up, topped with a corrugated metal roof. I moved in, and Emma, Linda, May, Angelina, and Camilla took over the decorating, with plenty of help from Sally. Around that time, the court summons arrived. Linda had finished her rehabilitation program, but recovery was still a challenge. LV had already begun the process of selling the house before foreclosure could hit. So I loaded up my truck, said a heavy goodbye to the little girl who had stolen my heart, embraced the women who meant everything to me, and headed for Cicero. Angie told me she'd be flying in soon to attend the hearing. It felt unreal to return after nearly 4 years away. The neighborhood hadn't changed much, but my old home looked forlorn. The grass was knee-high, the walkways choked with weeds, and one garage door was dented while the other had a haphazard coat of paint. A front window had even been boarded up. I didn't stop. I continued on to my mother's house. I needed to see her and apologize for all the worry I'd caused. I needn't have worried. She met me at the door as I approached with my duffel. She pulled me into a tight embrace, showering kisses on my face, neck, arms, anywhere she could reach. I took that as a sign of forgiveness, or something close to it. Her tears still hit me hard, so I said sorry anyway. Her smile told me I was home. She led me inside, took my bag to the guest room, and returned with a cup of coffee. She told me LV would be joining us soon so we could all talk. For the moment, she just wanted to sit beside me, hold me, and take me in. 2 hours later, LV showed up, Penny Wilson in tow. They stepped inside, LV gave my mother a warm hug, and introduced me to Penny. Then we got down to business. It was Wednesday. Angie was flying in on Friday, and the hearing was set for Monday. LV went over the situation as he saw it. The judge, he said, had a reputation for being strict but reasonable, especially tough on dishonesty and infidelity, but equally unsympathetic toward absentee fathers. It would be a risky undertaking. He outlined Linda's legal team and predicted their tactics. There would be no pursuit of custody, no demands for child support, and no request for alimony. He said he and Angie would fine-tune the strategy before the trial, but he was optimistic about our chances. Still, I couldn't shake the sense that there was something they weren't telling me, though I couldn't put my finger on it. That Friday, I drove the 40 minutes to O'Hare to meet the woman I now thought of as the sister I never had. She greeted me with a warm smile and offered her left hand. I locked eyes with her and asked with quiet intent, "You actually said yes?" She laughed and gave me a light-hearted smack on the arm. My grin came naturally. It had been a long time since I felt that kind of joy. Over the past 4 years, moments like that had become rare. Just a week earlier, Angelina had updated me on everything, letting me know that Robert Taylor had shown unwavering support for my situation. His understanding had been heartfelt. In time, I'd come to genuinely respect him. When we got to my mom's house, I brought Angelina in and made the introductions. My mother welcomed her with such warmth, it almost outshone how she's ever received me, oddly enough. The following day, we visited LV's office and made our way up to the 5th floor, where a spacious conference room was waiting. LV and Penny were already there. Once we'd all settled in with coffee, the tone shifted. They revisited every detail we'd gone over before, and added new ones. Angelina chimed in with the findings from her recent research. Everyone around that table seemed locked in, almost too attentive, perhaps for my benefit. Still, I couldn't shake a subtle suspicion that something was being kept under wraps. They assured me nothing had been hidden. Even so, the feeling lingered in the back of my mind. Angelina closed out the discussion by saying things were looking solid. Monday, she promised, would be the beginning of the end, in the best sense. Apparently, all the pieces were finally falling into place. Still, an odd sense of misdirection nagged at me, something I couldn't quite name. I smiled anyway and expressed my thanks. Maybe they were telling the truth. At that stage, I had no choice but to let go. Everything was in their hands now. I dared to hope that maybe, just maybe, the tide had turned. I offered a silent promise to God that I'd make it to church the next day. Back at the house, my mom made dinner, though I couldn't tell you what was on the plate, even if I tried. Afterward, I politely excused myself, took a quick shower, and turned in early. It wasn't even 9 p.m. Sleep didn't come easy. I twisted and turned, murmuring every prayer I could remember from childhood, and even made up a few new ones. Saint Michael and the Blessed Mother got the bulk of my attention. I left the father and son mostly out of it, figuring they'd had their fill of my griping. Eventually, I must have drifted off, because the next thing I knew, morning light was bleeding through the curtains. It was 6:30 a.m. I got up, hit the bathroom, brushed my teeth, shaved, and brewed a strong cup of coffee. I arrived at the church just in time for early mass. I stayed in the back, kept to myself, and prayed in silence. I didn't take communion. I didn't even rise when the congregation did. My head remained bowed from beginning to end. When the service ended, an older man approached and let me know that the tenors and another service were about to start, in case I wanted to stay. A cold shiver ran through me. I stood, thanked him politely, and walked out, feeling a few eyes follow me as I left. I spent the rest of the day driving along the lakeshore, the cold wind battering my car, until the clock read 6 p.m. Then I turned back home. Walking through the door, I saw the worry written all over my mother's face. She'd been anxious over my absence. I told her I was okay, that I just needed a little time to myself. And truthfully, I felt better, more grounded. I made myself a simple bologna sandwich, just like I used to as a kid, washed it down with a Coke, kissed my mom goodnight, and went to bed. As I stepped into the tiny bedroom, barely larger than a storage closet, I saw Angie, smiled, and whispered a quiet thank you to the sky. I felt as ready as I was ever going to be. Monday morning came brisk and bright. The air was cool, the light sharp. Court was scheduled for a 9 a.m. start. I arrived at 8:40. Inside the county courthouse, I searched for room 319. When I found it, LV, Angie, and Penny were already there, just about to enter. We greeted one another with uneasy smiles. Then I saw her. Linda. She exited the elevator flanked by 2 lawyers, and surprisingly, Dee and Jane were with her. She hadn't noticed me yet, her focus entirely on my group as they moved toward the door. Just as someone opened it, she paused, hesitated at something said, then turned and locked eyes with me. It was the same face I had loved for over 10 years, but the years had taken their toll. Her skin was uneven, her face fuller, and her makeup couldn't quite hide the signs of time. In contrast, I'd managed to hold up. Years of outdoor work and clean eating had kept me fit. I'll admit, there was a flicker of pride. She looked like she might approach, but her companions gently steered her into the room. Angie leaned over and murmured, "She doesn't look great, Jim." I gave a small nod. "It's sad," I said quietly. Angie looked taken aback for a moment, but then seemed to get it. We stayed outside the door a few more minutes before the elevator dinged again. My heart stuttered. It was my mother and Linda's parents. I hadn't expected to see them. My mother came straight to me and hugged me tightly. Linda's mother followed, warm and kind, and then her father extended his hand. I shook it, stunned. Emotion overtook me quickly. I stammered something about Linda already being inside. Her mom smiled and said, "That's all right. We're here for you." Her father gave a firm nod. "She had her chance," he said. "Now it's your time. Just be respectful." I couldn't help it. I pulled him into a hug. "Thanks, Dad," I whispered. Together we walked into the courtroom. My team and I took our seats at the plaintiff's table, while Linda's parents sat quietly behind me. There were only a few others in the room, maybe 4 in total, and a couple looked like young reporters already losing interest. Linda and her companions were already seated, casting uneasy glances between our side of the courtroom and her parents. Right at 9:05, the courtroom door at the back creaked open as the bailiff stood. "All rise. The Honorable Judge Thomas Kincaid will now preside over this session of family court." Chairs slid back and feet shuffled as the room complied. "This is case number 213, James R. Carlisle versus Linda Kramer, concerning the custody of minor children Emma Louise Carlisle, age 12, and Thomas James Carlisle, age 9, the bailiff announced. "We will also be reviewing matters related to child support and spousal maintenance. Everyone may be seated." Judge Kincaid stepped up to the bench, took his place, tapped his gavel once, and gave a brief nod. "Thank you, bailiff. Let's begin. Are both parties in attendance?" he asked. "Linda Kramer, respondent, Your Honor," she said, standing briefly. "I'm John Schultz, legal counsel for Ms. Kramer," her attorney chimed in. "And I'm Louis W. Stearns, representing the petitioner James Carlisle," came the next voice. "All right then," the judge said, scanning the case file. "Mr. Carlisle is requesting primary custody of the children and authorization to relocate them out of state. Is that an accurate summary?" Linda stood, projecting her voice toward the judge. "Yes, Your Honor. He's trying to remove my children from me, claiming I'm an unfit mother." "And the 2 of you are legally divorced, is that correct?" Judge Kincaid asked. "Yes, Your Honor. We are." "In that case," the judge said, "I need to understand what caused the breakdown of the marriage." The weight of that question hit like a thunderclap. I instinctively jolted forward in my seat, but LV clutched my hand and whispered urgently, "Not yet." LV adjusted his posture, clicked his pen once, and fixed his gaze ahead, calm but alert. Tears began to collect in Linda's eyes as she responded. "It was a weekend with friends in February. Things had been rough for a while and we were trying to lift our spirits. We went to Morrison's to dance, and Jim and I ended up arguing." Before she could finish, LV sprang up from his chair as if shot from a cannon. "Objection, Your Honor," he barked, cutting through the room's tension. "On what grounds?" the judge asked, eyebrows raised. "She's not being truthful," LV replied sharply. Both Mr. Schultz and Mr. Brush were instantly on their feet. "Your Honor, this is not a platform for character attacks," Schultz said firmly. Her statements have no direct bearing on the custody issue. Judge Kincaid took a moment, weighing the disruption. There seems to be more to this than initially stated. I'll allow the objection for now. Ms. Kramer has not been sworn in yet, so I'll let her continue, but proceed with caution. He gestured for the lawyers to sit and turned his attention back to Linda. Ms. Kramer, please explain what exactly took place that evening. The color drained from Linda's face, and she started trembling. She darted glances around the courtroom, visibly shaken. I can't talk about it. You don't understand, she mumbled. Her lawyer rose quickly. Your Honor, any implications of sexual misconduct are not germane to the current matter, he stated. LV's grin widened, as if he'd been handed an advantage. Even Angelina allowed herself a subtle smirk. The judge raised his eyebrows. Sexual misconduct? He repeated. Ms. Kramer, can you clarify that statement? She recoiled into her seat, eyes cast down, entirely mute. Judge Kincaid let the silence settle before speaking again, this time more gently. Ms. Kramer, do you feel prepared to inform the court about what really happened that night? You haven't been sworn in yet, but that can be arranged if needed. I can't, she whispered. I won't. You can't force me. The judge now looked puzzled and shifted his focus. Mr. Stearns, can your client provide an account of the events in question? LV turned to me. Our eyes locked, and the fire in my chest nearly pushed me out of my seat. Your Honor, I said firmly, rising, please swear me in. I'm ready to testify. Objection, Schultz shouted, voice rising. This is devolving into a one-sided narrative. It's unfair and has no relevance. Overruled, said the judge, steady and calm. Bailiff? The bailiff approached, holding the Bible. Place your left hand on the Bible and raise your right. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Meeting the bailiff's gaze, I answered, I do. State your name and address for the record, the judge instructed. James Carlisle. I live at Hideaway Marina, Golden Beach, Maryland. Very well, the bailiff said, stepping back. The judge gave me a nod. Go ahead, Mr. Carlisle. Tell the court what occurred that night. Turning to face him directly, I began with everything. When we left the house, the drive, arriving at the club, and how Linda later excused herself, supposedly to use the restroom. I left out no detail. Then I turned to look at Linda, who was clearly having a hard time staying composed as I spoke. She abandoned me that night, I said, not breaking eye contact with her. No warning, no conversation, no goodbye. She vanished, didn't return. She spent the night with another man, Marc Lavaliere. She left without a word, without a fight. She simply walked away. She walked away, so I followed suit. I returned home, leaving her behind just as she had once left me. I won't pretend it was noble, or even fair, but in that moment, it seemed like the only path left, much like it must have for her all those years ago. I did pause before leaving, though. I left a note. A small gesture, maybe, but something. In court, the air was thick with tension, broken only by the muffled sound of Linda weeping softly at her table. Then she exploded. You abandoned me, she cried out, tears choking her words. You left me to raise our 2 children alone. You selfish bastard. And what about you? I fired back. You did the exact same thing to me, Linda. The judge's gavel struck the bench twice, sharp and immediate. This courtroom will maintain order, he warned, his tone firm and unyielding. One more outburst, and there will be consequences. Linda's lawyer looked blindsided. This wasn't part of the script, and certainly not something that was supposed to be dragged out by me, of all people. The judge leaned back, took a breath, then leaned forward again, eyes steady. Ms. Kramer, he said, measured and clear, is Mr. James Carlisle's account accurate? His voice grew quieter, but no less potent. Did he speak the truth? I need your honesty now. Linda looked as though the ground beneath her had shifted. The illusion of her perfect past, the storybook life she'd tried to preserve, was unraveling in the face of undeniable truth. Her posture collapsed as she sank back into her chair. "I'm waiting, Ms. Kramer," the judge said once more, a note of finality in his voice. Her breath came out slowly, heavily, like she was letting go of years of denial. Then, eyes meeting the judge's, she whispered through tears, "Yes, Your Honor. What he said, it's all true. I was the one who destroyed everything." The judge blinked and turned to face me. "Mr. Carlyle," he said, voice steady but solemn, "I can see the hardship you've experienced. I recognize the emotional weight you carry. However, we cannot overlook the fact that you disappeared from your family's life for nearly 4 years. That reality holds weight." I felt like a fuse had been lit inside me, anger rising, ready to spill over in words I'd regret. But Angie stood up before I could speak. She placed a firm hand on my arm, pulled me close to her, and shot me a look that said, "Don't." Then she addressed the bench. "Your Honor, if I may, I'd like to make a statement on Mr. Carlyle's behalf." A new dynamic entered the room. "And who are you?" the judge asked. "Maya Angelina Lowell, sir. I'm Mr. Carlyle's legal representative from the state of Maryland. There are several people I believe you should hear from." Just then, another man leaned forward in his seat. "Permission to address the court, Your Honor?" "Go ahead," the judge replied. The man straightened, locking eyes with me before speaking. "When I first met James Carlyle, he looked like a man carrying 1,000 pounds on his back. Worn down, but not defeated." He continued, "He was looking for a place to stay, and we had a vacant cabin at the marina. Something told me to give him a chance. I'm glad I did. He's a different man now, still healing, but he's on the right track." Then Joseph stood up. "I haven't known Jim as long as my dad," he said, "but everything he said checks out. Jim's dependable. He's the real deal." Joshua Jr. chimed in next. "I agree," he said. "I haven't spent much personal time with Mr. Carlyle, but I've observed enough to back my family's opinion." He paused, then looked toward the bench. "Your Honor, Jim doesn't have military experience. But I looked into your background. Army Legal Services, retired major before taking the bench." He gave a slight grin. "Well, in my opinion, Jim has everything it takes to make a damn fine Marine. Just saying." Next was Mike. "Judge, my wife and I have known James for about 4 years now," he said, his voice unwavering. "We stand by him. I'd trust him with my family's lives without hesitation. Our kids call him Uncle Jim. He's the fun one, though we keep that between us." He looked toward the judge again. "But it's more than just trust. He's earned respect in Golden Beach. A while back, he stepped in during a carjacking, armed suspect, real danger. Jim risked himself to save a mother and her daughter." He glanced toward Camille, who nodded silently, then turned to the judge and gave a solemn, deliberate nod of confirmation. Finally, Sally stepped forward. "Years ago, James Carlyle walked into my diner looking like the world had chewed him up and spat him out," she said quietly. "I didn't know the full extent of what he'd been through then. I do now." She cast a knowing glance at Linda, who sat quietly sobbing. "But here's what I do know. This man picked himself up from rock bottom. He's kind, he's relentless, and he's worked to become a better version of himself." She turned to Jim's mother, who sat silently nearby. "You raised someone remarkable, ma'am. You should be proud." I sat there, stunned. I hadn't realized how many people had my back. Maybe I was more than just the sum of my mistakes. But Angie wasn't done. "Your Honor," she said, as the courtroom doors creaked open, "there's one more person who wishes to speak." And that moment changed everything. I turned around, and there she was. Emma Lindell stepped forward with quiet confidence, making her way to the barrier behind me. I took a step toward her, but she stopped me with a glance and a smile, calm, self-assured. She turned to the judge, her voice clear and composed. "Your Honor, If I may, I'd like to offer testimony in support of Mr. Carlyle." Linda's face turned ashen, her eyes fixed on Emma with a look of barely disguised rage. "Yes," the judge said simply. "You may speak. Would you mind identifying yourself, please?" "My name is Emma Lindell, Your Honor. James Carlyle protected my daughter Linda and me during an attempted mugging in Golden Beach, Maryland." A quiet stir swept through the courtroom. The judge rapped his gavel sharply, cutting through the noise and restoring silence. "You may continue, Mrs. Lindell," he said. "Thank you, Your Honor. I've known James for about a year and a half, some of that time personally, and the rest through mutual friends. I have nothing but respect for him. He's a man of honesty and strong moral fiber." She glanced briefly toward Ms. Kramer, her face cool, her eyes steady, an expression that didn't go unnoticed. After that night, James and I developed a close bond, though we were always respectful. I'll admit, I wished it would become something more. But for a long time, James still considered himself married, even if his wife didn't behave like she was. From the defense table, Linda grumbled just loud enough to be heard. Her muttered curses stirred murmurs across the room. The judge banged the gavel again, this time directing a stern warning at Mr. Deschultz, her lawyer, instructing him to control his client. With a scowl, Linda slouched in her seat, whispering angrily to herself. Emma continued, undeterred. "I knew it might take time for James to heal and move forward. This custody issue, it's an important milestone in that process. More than anything, I want to see him come through this with dignity. He's earned that. He truly is a decent man." She paused to steady her breath. "As I've said, I'll be here, however long it takes." A short silence followed. Then, quietly, she added, "I love him, Your Honor." A ripple moved through the gallery. Audible gasps. The judge lifted his eyebrows, momentarily caught off guard. Clearing his throat, he said, "Thank you, Mrs. Lindell. The court acknowledges your statement and your candor." Then, chaos. "No!" someone screamed. Linda leapt from her seat and made a break for the courtroom door. The judge shouted to the bailiff, his gavel striking down again in alarm. But it was too late. Linda was already gone. Her attorney scrambled, asking for a short recess so he could locate her. With a tired sigh, the judge agreed, granting a 2-hour lunch break and ordering court back in session at 2 p.m. "All rise," the bailiff called out. The judge left the bench, shaking his head. I turned to Emma and said, "So, you're in love with me?" "I think I felt the same for a while," I added. She blinked, startled. "You do?" "Come on, Emma. You're too sharp not to have sensed it. You had to know." A smile slowly appeared on her face, lighting it up. With a faint blush, she said, "Well, now I do." I reached out and gently took her hands. I kissed her, just a soft, meaningful gesture. When we turned, we saw familiar faces watching us, some grinning, some laughing, a few shyly looking away. We made our way to a steakhouse a few blocks away for lunch. My legal team was buzzing, particularly Angie, who was ecstatic about how her strategy in court had unfolded. LV, another attorney on the team, joked that if Emma ever wanted to leave Maryland behind, he'd gladly find her a position at his firm. By 1:45, we were back at the courthouse, only to find the defense team scrambling. Linda had vanished without a trace. A bench warrant was issued almost immediately. But what happened next shocked us. The defense filed notarized, legally binding documents. They confirmed that Linda had accepted the terms of our agreement and relinquished all parental rights. I stood there, stunned. Angie and LV pulled me aside to explain what had just occurred. I asked if there were any remaining legal complications. They exchanged a brief glance before LV said, "There aren't any. It's over. She signed everything. The divorce is finalized. You're done." Angie put a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "This chapter is closed, Jim. Move on. You owe her nothing." I couldn't respond. I was in disbelief. It was done. I had won. And yet, I couldn't stop thinking. What was the cost? There were still practical matters to handle. I had to pick up my kids from school. They didn't know yet, but they'd find out soon enough. Apparently, a couple of reporters, one from a local CSIRO publication, another from the Chicago Sun-Times, had been trying to reach out to my ex. With her disappearance, the spotlight shifted to me. LV promised to issue a press statement the following day, after they'd gone through all the paperwork. "Give it a day," he said with a smirk. "Something else will catch their attention soon enough." When I got to the school, I spotted Emma and Tommy, 12 and 9, coming out of the building with their usual blend of energy and disarray. They were heading toward their grandparents, then stopped. They saw me standing there with a woman they didn't recognize. For a moment, they hesitated. Then came the cries. "Daddy! Daddy!" They ran at me, laughing and yelling, wrapping their arms around me in a tangle of excitement. There were tears, giggles, kisses, and a flood of questions. "Where were you? Why didn't you call? We missed you so much." What had just happened? Why was Mom so angry? And more pressingly, where had she gone? No one offered the children any meaningful explanation. The quiet that followed felt strange, almost eerie. It lingered in the air like smoke, uncertain and thick. I crouched down beside the kids, wrapping them in a comforting embrace. A short distance away stood Emma Lindell, watching hesitantly, clearly unsure whether to approach. I rose to my feet and beckoned her over. She stepped forward cautiously. "Guys, this is Emma Lindell," I told them softly. "She's a good friend of mine." I tried to shift the mood. "How about we visit my grandparents for the afternoon? We can grab lunch, meet a few folks, just have a relaxed time." The children exchanged unsure looks before finally nodding in agreement. "Okay," they said, as they slung their backpacks onto their shoulders. We walked over to my grandparents' car, already equipped with proper car seats, and set off. At the house, the children ran straight to the backyard, where a small group was already gathered. But the fun couldn't last forever. After lunch, and after the kids cheered over the news that there'd be no school the next day, it was time to talk seriously. I gathered with 3 of the grandparents, along with LV, Angie, and Emma, whom I made sure to include. We all sat down outside under the open sky, and I began. "Your mom's gone," I said carefully. "I'm not sure where she went, but we're going to try and find her. For now, she's not with us anymore. That's what matters." The kids took it in with a surprising stillness. Maybe it wasn't that surprising. Perhaps they'd already grown used to her sudden absences. This wasn't the first time she'd vanished. Her parents had even tried to gain custody once, back when Linda's behavior had become erratic. The children were practically living with them already. Their things, their lives revolved around that house. My official residence had always been with my grandparents, and Linda often stayed there too. "So here's where things stand now," I continued. "I went to court, and I was awarded custody. Your grandparents supported the decision, and so did your mom. But now, the choice is yours. You can come live with me, or you can stay here with your grandparents. I won't make that choice for you. I'll always be honest with you, and when you're ready to hear more, I'll answer any questions you have. Some answers might take a little time to fully understand." My daughter broke the silence first. "She cheated on you, didn't she?" she asked. Her voice didn't waver. "There were always different men. It went on for so long. They were awful." Tommy frowned in disgust. "That guy Mark was the worst. That's just nasty, Dad." It wasn't difficult to see why I didn't feel much sympathy for Linda. A quiet fell over us again. Emma, now sitting close beside me, gently took my hand in hers. Then Tommy blurted out, "So, is she your girlfriend?" He looked straight at Emma. Caught off guard, I looked away. "Well, yeah." Emma nudged me with a teasing smile, and little Emma burst into giggles. "Yup," she said to Tommy playfully. Definitely his girlfriend. The atmosphere softened. You know, little Emma said, looking up at her namesake. My name's Emma too. Big Emma grinned. My full name's Emmeline, she told her, but everyone calls me Emma. My real name's Emily, little Emma responded, lighting up. But my friends call me Emma too. I exhaled inwardly. Good, I thought. No awkward name clashes. Tommy had been quietly observing the exchange. At only 9 years old, he already had a perceptive streak. He turned to me, his eyes serious. I think she's good for you, Dad, he said. Then, after a beat, do you? I met his gaze, caught off guard by how well everything was going, better than I could have imagined. I think so too, buddy, I said softly. In the following 2 days, we had plenty of heart-to-hearts, thoughtful, meaningful conversations. I sat down with my ex-in-laws and with my mom to share my plans. I told them about the house I'd built in Maryland and laid out an idea. They could sell their homes and come with us. Start over. A fresh chapter. To my great relief, they agreed. The kids were thrilled, especially knowing their grandparents would join us. The adults welcomed the change too. From the moment Linda vanished, we moved forward. LV stepped in to help my mother organize the sale of her house. She held a big garage sale, donated what she could, and packed the rest. My in-laws did the same. Once their house was on the market, they rented a 40-foot truck and got ready for the road ahead. The children returned to school briefly while we took care of logistics. We handled the paperwork to transfer their school records and prepped for the new life in Maryland. I stayed behind to help with the final packing. Eventually, we set off, my father-in-law and the kids in one car, my mother and I driving the moving truck. After an overnight stop at a motel, we finally made it back to Golden Beach. Camilla had already made arrangements with school counselors to support the kids' transition. Fortunately, the plan worked. The children were adapting better than anyone expected. Still, no sign of Linda. Once everyone had arrived, I showed them around the new house. My father-in-law's home was just minutes away. After my mom and the kids chose their bedrooms, we walked over to check out the grandparents' new place. Camilla and I welcomed them, handed over the keys, and walked them through the house. They looked genuinely content. While everyone was settling in, I returned to my place, and there, on the porch, sat Emma and Linda, deep in conversation, with the rest of the family nearby. As I stepped up, my daughter met me at the steps with a cool, unwavering stare. So, she said sharply, are we getting a new mom now? And another sister? Ah, yes. I guess I neglected to bring that up earlier. She glanced my way before bursting into laughter, tears still streaking her face. Thanks, Dad, she said warmly. She wrapped me in a firm embrace. Tommy approached shortly after, his expression unreadable, though the number of bedrooms now clearly made sense to him. He kept his eyes averted, definitely someone to keep tabs on. My crew arrived soon after, and within just a few hours, we had all of my in-laws' things moved in. The house was ready, just the unpacking remained. The same had been done with my mother's belongings, which had come in a small storage unit a few days prior. I made sure to thank everyone for their help and treated them all to a meal at Sally's. Afterward, I checked my bank balance. It was time to return to the grind. Life picked up its pace again, carried forward by 2 young people figuring out their place in a new house and unfamiliar environment. Linda settled in swiftly, and before long, my family began adjusting to the added layer of teenage emotion. Tommy and I started to bond more, driven partly by the friendly rivalry that developed, our team versus theirs. Any parent knows what that kind of energy feels like. It was lighthearted, playful. Since then, things have shifted. The kids are doing exceptionally well in school and are poised to begin the new academic year on even ground. Emma and I got married in mid-August in a simple ceremony, then jetted off to New Orleans for our honeymoon. Even though my business was still in recovery mode, we mostly stayed in, enjoying each other's company or dining out. The heat of the South didn't really affect our plans much. As for Linda, It's hard to say. But somehow I managed to reassemble the scattered fragments of my life, thanks to devoted friends, a loving extended family, and an amazing, steadfast wife. I can honestly say I'm happy. Did I make the right decision back then, all those years ago? Perhaps. Maybe it was the only one available to me. What I do know is that I was lucky, and that, more than anything, is the truth I hold on to. Our story has come to an end. What do you think about this story? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed the way I tell stories, head over to my channel and check out my other videos. May the force be with you. See you soon, my friend.